In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Well, our saint for today, Saint John Baptiste de La Salle, was a French priest and is the patron saint of teachers and the youth, the founder of the Institution of Christian Brothers, and is actually considered to be the father of the modern Catholic school system. Quite an valuable and invaluable even work that he did. He was of noble birth, born in the year 1651, died in 1719, and this is a time of great social, we could say, change in Europe and in France especially. The educational system into which St. John Baptiste de La Salle was born was lopsided. Only the children of the wealthy or the well-off could receive an education. The poor, even the middle class, their opportunities for learning, for studies, was very poor. Was not very good at all. And so this is where Saint John spent his life's work. He didn't intend to, actually, in the beginning, but it kind of ended up that he spent his entire life helping the condition of the poor. He himself, being from a noble family, received an excellent education, and he was very well suited to it. He earned a master's degree by the time he was 19, and he had a doctorate in theology just a few years later in his 20s. His parents died when he was, about the time he was in college. I think he left for a few years and then came back, received the priesthood, was ordained a priest, but also at the same time was taking care of some of his younger siblings. His parents left him a manor house, a mansion, wealth, so they were able to sustain themselves. But it was St. John who actually educated his own brothers and sisters. So kind of his we could say tendencies to educate the youth were coming out with his own family. They say that charity begins at home. So he really, at this time, he began to devote himself to the poor children, and he had, it seemed to him that, as he said, the poor had little hope for salvation, either in this world or the next, and the children of the lower classes were left to themselves and badly brought up. So he wanted to do something about this, and there was education available. There were teachers for the poor, and these teachers often offered their services for free, but these teachers themselves were often poorly educated. They lacked leadership, they lacked unity, there wasn't any kind of system to help them teach the poor. So that's where St. John Baptiste became involved, is he actually didn't teach the children himself, but he taught the teachers who taught the children. So he went one level up to try to improve the entire system. Now, he taught them. What did he do? He provided them with some financial assistance from the wealth his parents left him, refined their education, right, using his doctoral degree, and he taught them basic manners, table manners, etiquette, speaking, greeting others, and so on. Now, this was very important, especially at that time. French was, we could say, the victim or even the perpetrator of French snobbery. Like all 400 years ago, famous for their snobbery. Yes, it was true, and that was an unfortunate system. Right? All across Europe, that was the case, in that if you didn't know manners, if you were not educated in social etiquette, you were one of the rudes. You were the French peasantry. What was that? They call you swine, kind of a thing. It wouldn't even have anything to do with you. You didn't know how to act. You didn't know how to behave. You didn't know how to speak. You didn't know how to greet them. You didn't use the proper words when coming up to me. I'm not even going to give you my time. Now that's not entirely a bad system. Is to have a system of higher, a way of speaking better. But it had become corrupt at that point. I've mentioned this before, but it's worth noting that on a historical note, that European etiquette grew out of Benedictine monasteries. In that way back in the 8th and 6th and 5th centuries, the monasteries were founded, and every monk in the monastery, right, every nun has a place, has a rank, and you treat somebody of a higher rank as if you were treating Christ. They come in, you offer them your seat, you're sitting down, you always give somebody higher than you the best that you can. Conversely, if somebody is higher than somebody else, they take care of all of those below them as Christ would take care of the poor, sacrificing themselves, giving themselves to those under them. Now that example, that is how the Benedictine monasteries developed. And nobility was always coming there. The kings, the queens, even the aristocracy, they had relatives in these monasteries and convents. They would go and visit. They would even join for a while, and they would go back to their houses and families, and they would bring this kind of etiquette with them. And that is how we could say that the kind of historical roots of that etiquette. So it does have good roots. It is a good way of acting and speaking and behaving, but it can become corrupted. Right, when it's seen as not done for Christ, but done for me. You didn't give me the proper respect. When I'll give you the proper respect if I get mine first. That's the natural tendency. So that's what happened in France with the etiquette. It's supposed to be a good thing. It can be a good thing, but not if it's done for the wrong reason. If it's used selfishly. So this was the case. This was the situation that St. John Baptiste found the poor. They didn't know this because we were taught this as children. If you didn't know it as a child, nobody would teach you because you should already know. There was an idea that the aristocracy, kind of like the Pharisees, who sinned, this man or his parents, or what sin did this man's parents commit that he was born blind? If you were born poor, it was you inherited vice. And if you were born to nobility, you inherited virtue. You were a better person because you were born to a better family. Like that was the kind of prejudice that was going on at the time. So if you weren't born in a good family, don't bother trying to teach them manners. They can't learn it. They're already predisposed to vice. That's where they're born. That's where they belong. They shouldn't be any higher. That's called prejudice, right? And that's what St. John Baptiste was fighting against. And so you can imagine he met quite a bit of resistance. And see, this is the social change that the church does and has done in the past. Men like St. John Baptiste de La Salle, these were the original, I don't know what you call it, philanthropists and social justice workers. They're the ones who made it happen for real the first time, actually helping the poor, actually helping them to ennoble their souls. What St. John Baptiste did is he began to teach the teachers, right, how to not just improve their education, but he improved their manners. It wasn't enough to teach them. They needed an example. So he began inviting them into his parents' house, what used to be his parents' house. He would dine with them in his aristocratic, upper-class, wealthy way. His brothers and sisters, his own brothers and sisters, were reluctant at first. Why have these rude, illiterate teachers with us? But they warmed up to it eventually. And this went on for some time until St. John Baptiste realized it wasn't enough to be with the teachers, to educate them, even to dine with them. He needed to live with them. He needed to live in the same house, properly to teach them. It's a whole way of thinking. When you change your manners, when you change your behavior, when you change your comportment, it starts with you have to change your idea of yourself. I can be better. I don't have to live this way. I don't have to speak this way. There's an elevated manner of speaking and living that corresponds to the nobility of soul that we all possess because we are baptized. We are sons and daughters of God. We are brothers and sisters of Christ the King. We all have nobility in our soul, and we all can act according to that appropriately. This is the message that St. John Baptiste wanted to send to those teachers and to the poor, but it has to be, you can't learn the gospel from a book, dead letters on a page. The Bible itself tells that, right? Faith without works is dead. You have to, it's a living faith. You have to learn it from somebody. Faith comes through hearing. Faith comes through seeing and believing and living and being with somebody. St. John Baptiste realized that, and he lived with the teachers in their poor surroundings, with their rude manners that he was certainly very offended by, but he overcame it. And this is like Christ. He didn't shun or shy away from the lepers. He became a leper. Right? He became sin for our sake. But it wasn't easy. What did he say? St. John Baptiste himself says, quotes, he says, Indeed, if I had ever thought that the care I was taking of the schoolmasters would have made it my duty to live with them, I would have dropped the whole project. God, who guides all things with wisdom and serenity, whose way is not to force our inclinations, willed me to commit entirely to the development of the schools. He did this in an imperceptible way over a long period of time, so that the one commitment led to another in a way that I did not foresee in the beginning. A very, very, we could say, that's how you know God's will is. God's will is not sudden or jerky or rough. It is very smooth, and it's very imperceptible, as he says. You don't even notice that it's happening. It's just one thing leads to another. I was doing my prayers, and it seemed, this is a good decision. I wasn't expecting this, but let's go ahead and do it, and everything falls into place. When we feel like in order to do God's will, we have to pound that square peg into the round hole, it's probably a sign that this is not working. It may take effort, we may meet with resistance, but there shouldn't be this idea of an angst on the inside, a lack of peace, this feeling that it seems like, God, I feel like I'm having to fight you in order to get this done. That's a clear sign. Don't do it. Do something else. Let it alone. God is a God of peace, and he operates smoothly. But it's not always what we want. And was it, if I knew what I was getting myself into, I probably never would have done it. Thank goodness God doesn't reveal that to us. 50% of priests and probably 70% of married people wouldn't do their vocation, right, if they knew everything that was going to happen. But that is the mercy of God. But of course, afterwards, people are very, very happy. This was the will of God. Wouldn't trade it for anything. That was St. John Baptiste. So he did this for many, many years. He founded the Institute of Christian Brothers, became widespread, successful all over Europe and the United States, and he died in the year 1719 on Good Friday. What an honor for him. What a blessing. We could all do to benefit from the example of St. John Baptiste, because we can all be educators, we can all be schoolmen, we can all use the example that we have, our abilities, whatever they are, to teach others. We don't have to be in a high position, we don't have to be giving sermons or writing books or anything like that, to be teaching others through our example and our very being, our way of life. It was said that, St. Catherine of Siena, people would convert just by looking at her. Looking at her would convert people, because that's what happens when we transform ourselves on the inside. And if there's anything that people probably overlook, it is the power of having a different idea of ourselves, that nobility of soul. We should all think about that. How do I view myself? Is my behavior, my actions, stop and think, do I rationalize this? Well, I'm not like some noble person. I'm not like a lady or a gentleman, but we should be. Right? We should be. We can change our perception of that and know myself. I shouldn't be speaking like this. Not even just cuss words, but crude words, low humor. There's a reason it's called that, low, base. It's unfitting for those of us who've received baptism. Our souls have been ennobled. The tongue on which our Lord is placed in Holy Communion, what kind of words is that tongue speaking? What am I saying? What am I saying to others, about others? I should be using this tongue to speak kindly, to say prayers, to meditate upon the Gospels. That's why God gave me a tongue in the first place. Not to lie, but to speak the truth, to speak well of others. That's the kind of thing that when we have a higher idea of ourselves, an ennobled opinion of our soul, that it raises up all the rest of us. And God can really do something with that. He can really make a difference with somebody who understands the nobility that we have, and they spread it out to others. So I wish us to have that, to take away today that idea, to let it penetrate our lives and spread it to the lives of others. And we can ask to do that through the intercession of St. John Baptiste de La Salle. God bless you all. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.